Y'all are in luck. Two reasons. First, the first two sermons that I preached here, I was concerned about filling all the 25 minutes up. And I obviously went over several times. This time around, I was like, all I got to do is fit it into 25 minutes. So I took a different approach. We're going to see if we can make this work. The other aspect of it is the heater's off, or the air conditioner's off. It's hot, and it's even hotter up here. Now, I don't know if that's mental or if that's physical. I think it might be a little bit of both. But let's go ahead and get into today's passage. What we have here is we have two actions that are fueled by faith that we see. We see two opposing actions. One of the very obvious actions of Jonathan, the other one of the actions of Saul and how he reacted to all this. In chapter 14, we start to see a contrast between Saul and his son Jonathan. How they react to different circumstances when they are faced with different aspects of generally life. From a military standpoint, Israel was in a bad spot. We see at the end of chapter 13, the Philistines have all the weapons. In fact, the truth of the matter is that the Israelites have to go to the Philistines to sharpen their axes and plows. The Philistines have a monopoly on all the weapons. They have horse-drawn chariots, soldiers with better armor. And on top of that, they have a garrison. This is not a camp. This is not something where the Philistines are just staying right here for a period of time. They're here for the long haul. They've claimed this land. This is ours. We're going to do military operations from this point. This is not a temporary setup. I had a buddy of mine from Georgia, and he used this term, and this term kind of fits where the Israelites are at this time. He says, they're like a catfish nailed to a fence post. They're done. D-U-N, done. He was from Georgia. But as we'll see, this passage is going to lead on to extraordinary actions that was taken by faith. Extraordinary actions that was fueled by the faith of God. And I love how this starts. I just love how it starts. One day, Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to a young man carrying his armor. You almost see it, right? Now, everybody thinks that war is all about combat and action and everything else, but the truth of the matter is war is a very boring place to be. There's a lot of times you're just sitting around waiting, and I can just picture Jonathan laying on his rack with his armor bearer right next to him, and they're thinking, and he's just thinking, and all of a sudden he pops up and he says, "You know what? This is what we ought to do." He just pops right up. Let's go down and see what the Philistines are up to. Let's go see what they're doing. See, at this point in time, there's an itch that Jonathan has, and he has to scratch it. He has to. He doesn't know where the itch came from, but he has to scratch it. He has no idea what's going to happen. There is no plan. And it makes no sense what he does next because he doesn't even tell anybody he's going. He tells nobody. There is no backup. When things go south, there's nobody else. But he did have this. He had God's covenant with the Israel people, and the Philistines did not. Look in verse 6. Jonathan reaffirms his intent to press forward, not knowing what God has in store for him. Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let's go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us." Uncircumcised, when I was a kid and I read this story, I thought it was like a derogatory term, that they were using, those people over there or whatever the case may be. But really, I believe what Jonathan's saying here is, let's go see what these people out of God's covenant are doing. We're within God's covenant. We're God's chosen people. We're the Israelites. And these people are not. Why are we so concerned about what about the situation that we're in. We have the covenant. The other aspect that gets me on this, that really struck me when I first started reading this, if Jonathan has so much faith, why does he use such doubtful words like maybe? Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that God will work for us. He's still got the itch, right? He's still got to scratch it. He doesn't know what's going on. He's not sure how this is going to work out. Because the truth of the matter is he has an unhealthy acknowledgement that God has an unrevealed will. God's got a plan. He has no idea what it is. He doesn't know how this is going to work. He knows he's drawn to this. It's almost like he knew Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11 before it even started. Ephesians 1, verse 11 reads like this. In him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works in all things according to the counsel of his will. Well, that tells me that everything's planned out. That tells me that God's got it. He's in control of everything. Everything. In all things. Not some things, all things. Once again, another example, the faith that Jonathan is showing, even though he doesn't know. It's a healthy acknowledgement. It's a prayer. He devises a way to seek God's guidance before moving forward at this point in time. So he's up here and he's looking at him, right? You almost see like he's peering around the rock, looking at the garrison down below or up higher. And he's talking to his armor bearer and he says, we're going to present ourselves to them so they'll see us. And if they come down to us, we will not fight. But if they call us up, at that point in time, we will know that God has turned them over to us, and we will be able to go to war. What Jonathan does here is something that his father has so much problems doing. Seeking guidance from God. He leaves us up into God's hands. He says, if this happens, that means that God is with us and we will move forward with this plan. He also chooses a way to fight that is idiotic by military standards. Completely stupid. Now what we have here is we have a garrison up on a high hill. In fact, the hill is so high that you got to climb up it by hands and feet. This is not something that he's walking out to. He's got to spend all of his energy to get up there. He gives up his high ground. He gives up his place that he has. It makes more sense that he should wait for them to come to him. He knows this area. He's already reconned it. And he also lost the element of surprise. If he wanted to take out 20 Philistines, wouldn't it be better to set an ambush? Everything that he does not make sense by common sense. All the glory in this situation, if it comes to play, if it plays out, and we know it will, goes to God. Because nobody climbs a mountain and attacks 20 Philistines that are fully rested, fully prepared, and waiting for them to come up and comes out on top. It doesn't happen. There's only one way for this to work out. You know, and I kind of think that Jonathan knew this when he made this prayer of, hey, if they call me up, then we're going to go up and fight. He knew this. I don't want any glory. This is not about me. This is about God. It would have been much easier for him just to go ahead and say, God, if they come down here, we're going to fight. But he gives it all. He doesn't save any for himself. At this point in time, we know what happens when he gets to the top. Well, let's take a step back. So the Philistines, they present themselves. The Philistines start mocking them. Hey, look, the Israelites are coming out of their holes. Look, they're finally ready to fight. And then they make the fatal mistake, and it's all in a joke. Come up here, let me teach you a thing or two. As soon as they said that, their fate was sealed. God had turned them over. Come on up here. That's what he was waiting for. And it's kind of funny because you think about it like one of them cheesy action movies, you know? You almost like, so Jonathan goes up there and he does these amazing things. Within basically the area of a large front yard, he kills 20 Philistines. And we all picture it in our head. There's flying swords, and he's doing all these amazing side kicks and roundhouses and everything else, and it looks like it's choreographed. And you almost wish at the end that as he draws his sword out of a soldier, he sits there, says, "Class dismissed," and walks away. But he really doesn't, and the reason why he doesn't is because that brings glory to himself. He doesn't. Everything is for God. So once this goes on, and if you got to understand about the way they fought wars back then, is their deities, their gods, played a big role in what was going on. Both the Israelites and the Philistines. And the Philistines said, our God's powerful, and we're not worried about your God. And so when one man goes up to this garrison and takes out 20 Philistines, the Philistines start realizing that our God's not powerful. And they see it. And they start to panic. And then what we have is the fog of war setting in. This is a real term, the fog of war. Fog of war is nothing but confusion. It's when command and control is lost, you no longer have communication with those around you, and you're every man for himself. And God shakes the earth, and confusion sets in on the Philistines. The faith of one man was God's entry point to saving the day for the Israelites. It started with an itch, sitting in a rack in a tent, and Jonathan pops up and says, let's go see what God can use this for. I have no idea how this is going to work out. I have no idea what's going to happen. But let's just go see. What we have here is we have an example, a blueprint of faith. Something that Jonathan shows to us where he takes himself completely out of the picture. He takes no credit for it. At the end of the verse, at the end of this passage, so the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed beyond. Jonathan didn't save the day that day. The Lord did. Jonathan knew all this stuff. And so when I'm looking at the armor bearer, and before the battle starts, the armor bearer says, I'm with you heart and soul, Jonathan. And I'm like, what a scary, scary thought. As a leader of Marines, I've thought about it many times. And when I was invited as a leader here at this church, it terrified me. And so I look at the armor bearer that's not named. It makes sense that he would be with them heart and soul. Jonathan's heart and soul was with God. It makes sense. These are the things that we got to remember when we're dealing with our children. If we want our children to be with us heart and soul, where does our heart and soul belong? If we want the people that we work with to be with us heart and soul, that kind of loyalty is hard to come by. I got off track. Let's continue on here. So let's look at how Saul reacts to this whole situation. It's only a few verses that we're talking about here. But Saul gets wind of what's going on. He hears the calamity. He hears the confusion going on. And what is the first thing he does? Who's responsible for this? Who do I reward for this? What happened here? And so he calls all of his men and gets a head count. And you know what's funny is that this head count that he's calling, there's 600 there's 600 soldiers there, 600 Israelites there. It's going to be hard to get a head count that quick. This is going to be a drawn-out process. But he takes time to do it because he wants to know who's responsible. Not one does he stop and does he grab his priest, does he give thanks that something's happened here that's he's not responsible for. Not once does he think, God has turned over the Philistines to me. He wants to know what man's responsible. He's so stuck in this world. He's so stuck in what's going on. And you see it later on. The next thing he does, once he realizes, he takes his head count, he realizes that Jonathan, the armor bearer, are gone. Now he's ready for action. In accordance with the law set forth in Deuteronomy 20, 1 through 4, Saul summons his priests and the ark to receive guidance and encourage the troops. If you look back into Deuteronomy 1 through 4, it talks about the role of the priests and what they're supposed to do prior to going into battle. They're supposed to pray. They're supposed to get guidance from God. They don't go into battle without doing this. And then after that, the priests go in front of the men and they remind them, God is with you. You are Israel. You've got the covenant with God. Saul knew this. Saul knew the laws. But as the priest is raising their hands, Saul pulls his hand down and says, you know what, we got to get going. And at this point in time, what's happening now is the calamity, the confusion is growing so loud, and he can't handle it anymore. He's got to get involved. And you know what? It makes sense about where he's at right now. Because there was a book that I read. It was part of the military reading that I had to do. And the author of Colonel Dave Grossman. And he wrote this investigative book. It was on killing. And what he was talking about is our what happens in war. What happens in combat. And he takes a very psychological approach to his research. And he actually even goes into further research and goes into anthropology and everything else. And what he discovers is, what he uncovers is that a majority of the wounds from these times, when we were fighting hand-to-hand combat, a majority of the death and destruction took place after the initial confrontation. So we've seen the movies where you got two forces and they clash. And as they clash, they're intermingling, and there's nothing but swords and spears and horses, and it's close combat, and you're thinking, that's where all the death is. But history proves it's not. History proves that at that point in time, there's going to be one force that is overwhelmed, and they're going to run. And when that running takes place is where the true killing, the true routing takes place. Well, so what we have here right now is we got the Philistines who, without even hardly a confrontation, but one man goes in and he gets them and they're running. And they're fighting each other. He can't handle it. Saul cannot handle this. He's seeing all these things go on. He sees his opportunity. This is the prime spot. Life does not get any better than this. I've got to go. And so what does he do? He pulls down the hand of the priest. He withdraws the hand of the priest and he says, we're going right now. And he rallies the troops. Once again, Saul's taken away the duties of the priest. So with this, they go, and what do they discover when they see the Philistines? They see Philistine on Philistine fighting. They see Hebrew slaves fighting the Philistines, because at that time there was slaves and turncoats, if you will, traders that were involved with the Philistine camp. This was a camp, not a camp. This was a garrison that was set up that needed service. And at that point in time, the Hebrews that were within the walls of this garrison turned on the Philistines as well. What Saul sees is Philistines dying, and he's not doing the killing. The whole thing's been taken away from him. So he rallies his troops. He gets them in. He gets them into battle. The thing you got to realize here is there's not a single military commander who studied combat, who studied the art of war, that would have faulted Saul for what he had done. He saw an opportunity and he went for it. But you also got to remember there's not a commander out there that would have a successful career encouraging what Jonathan did. What we do does not make sense. What we're asked to do, what our faith makes us do, does not make sense to people outside of the covenant. It doesn't make sense. And we've all faced the decisions that Paul said has faced. We've all done them. In fact, we've all failed at the same decisions. It's so much easier for us to put faith in the circumstances and ourselves. One of the things that me and Kylie have done since we were married is we've set aside part of our money for tithe. And it's a certain amount. And what this is not so God can get his money from us. What this is a faith, if you will. God, no matter what, this is yours. You've given me all of this. I'm setting this aside for you. And so what we do is we tithe. Now, if you talk to a lot of counselors, economic counselors, they'll tell you, take care of yourself first. Everything else next. Some will even go as far as to say that you put money in your savings account prior to paying your bills. When me and Kylie have struggled in the past on finances or whatever the case may be, we were sitting there going, man, we need $200 to take care of this. And we got to have it. And then we're writing that check out for tithe. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. God's taking care of me right here. It makes sense. There's the money, God. Hey, thank you, God. I'm going to go ahead and take this. No, because see, here's the deal was, and this is a personal thing for me. We made a promise that this is what we were going to do. And if I have faith, I'm going to continue doing this. And God will take care of us. And he didn't take care of us the next day or the next week. He took care of us after payday, 2 weeks from then. And we were all right, and I'm here today. A lot of times the decisions of faith, a lot of times the decisions that we do on a daily basis are not easy. They're not the right choice. They're not the common sense of choice. Any financial advisor says, don't worry about the church. The church has plenty of money, and that's absolutely a true fact. But it has nothing to do with the money. It has to do with my heart and my faith. And that's the problem with Saul. It's not his actions. Truth of the matter is, if you talk about wisdom, most military commanders tell you he had wisdom. He had the wisdom to see an opportunity and take it. And he didn't have to wait for some silly ceremony to go do it. Get the ceremony out of the way. Let's go do this. God does not operate that way. And it wasn't the fact that he denied the ceremony. It wasn't the fact that he denied the priest of their roles in this battle. It was the fact that he thought he knew better. Saul's faith was in himself. Saul's concerns was, I need to get the victory. If I can get this victory, the people will have faith in me as a military leader. Saul can't even get out of his own way right now. Jonathan knows the victory is God's alone. Jonathan's faith was set him apart that day, and God rewarded him. And the way he rewarded Jonathan is he used Jonathan. That should be all of our desires. God's will is going to take place, folks. God's will is going to take place. Whether Eric Dodd gets up here and preaches today, somebody's going to do it. Somebody's going to speak the truth. The question is God going to reward you by using you? Is your faith that good that he's going to use you? Are you going to be the entry point on God's saving grace? Are you going to be the one to introduce the covenant that we have with God to those who are outside the covenant? It's not actions, folks. It's about the heart. It's about your faith. Jonathan believed God's covenant. Saul knew God's covenant. Jonathan believed all things are possible with God. Saul knew that too. But man can do pretty good when the circumstances are right. That's Saul's belief. Jonathan needed God's approval before he moved forward with this calling. Saul knew it was a good thing to have, but if I can do it without it, even the better. Saul didn't have the patience to wait for God's approval. Saul didn't have the patience to wait for the priests. Saul didn't have the patience to allow the priests to speak to the troops before going into battle. Saul knew better. And we see where that put him. We see where his evilness comes from. We see how decrepit he is. His faith in himself, his faith in the circumstances that he recognized, caused him to go against God's law. We find ourselves in the same situation. One of the things that Jonathan had more than anything else, and I say this before, Jonathan believed God. Saul believed in God. And here's the difference. Saul knew who God was. Saul's seen God work in his life. Saul surrounded himself with a priest. He surrounded himself with the ark. He surrounded himself with all these religious aspects. He believed in God. He did not believe God. And we know there's a difference there. Because Jonathan believed God. Jonathan, the one thing he had was the promise that God gave to the Israelites in Deuteronomy 28, verse 7. The Lord will cause your enemies to be defeated before you. They shall come out against you one way and flee before you seven. Generations before Jonathan comes into play here, the promise was made, and Jonathan believes it. We have that same promise, but it's not against flesh and blood. Turn with me to Romans chapter 8, 31 through 34. What shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for all of us, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who condemns? Jesus is the one who died. More than that, who was raised, who is on the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. We can move forward now. When you have that itch, when you have that calling, when you have that itch that, hey, you know what? I think I want to get into the ministry. I think I want to go over and teach the children over the children's ministry. I think I want to get involved with the technical setup here. I think I want to get involved over here. I think I want to do this. I think I want to go to South America and preach to people in the jungle. When you have that kind of calling, act on it. I cannot promise you that you're going to be successful. We all talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who had great faith, and they went into the fire. They were thrown into the fire for not obeying the laws of the land, but only obeying the law of God. And as they're thrown into the fire, they're not harmed. Now, as a kid, I remembered that. And it's worked in me. But we forget the faith that he had. Just because you're operating in God does not mean that you're going to feel the success that you think you should feel. Jonathan said it may be that God will work for us. Jonathan knew he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. He just didn't know how it was going to turn out. He just didn't know how it was going to turn out. And God used him. God can use all of us. Have no fear. Have no fear, for who can be against us? Romans promises victory, not of flesh and blood, a victory in a spiritual realm. And too many times we get caught up in this flesh and blood of what a victory is, what it means to be successful, what it means. We get caught up and we forget where we're at. Let's go ahead and have the band come up. This same covenant that we have right now, this is the same covenant. God is with us. We're chosen. God has pulled us into his family. He's made us his promise. This promise is as plain as day. This promise is the same promise that he gave Jonathan. Your enemies will run before you. We know this to be true. Our enemies are not in flesh and blood, though. Our enemies are the spiritual realm. As soon as we grasp our hands around that, we're going to find ourselves in a more successful situation. This covenant was given to the Israelites. This same covenant is given to us. If you find yourself now in a situation where this covenant, you find yourself on the outside, but just like Jonathan, you have this itch that you just got to scratch. You can't figure it out. That maybe that God's working in your life right now. Say a prayer. Our dearly Father,